You know how it goes sometimes if you're trying out a new technique, might be in painting, might be in building terrain or putting models together. And in fact, just recently I had a double whammy because not only was I trying a new technique, I was trying out a new material as well. So, what do you do when your cobbled streets on rubber mats don't turn out? Well, all is not lost because you can repurpose them. Yes, today on Dragon's Teeth, we're building rubber rivers and plastic roads. Hi, I'm Rob Poynton. Thanks for joining me today on Dragon's Teeth. So yes, if you've been following the Innsmouth build, you will have seen that I tried to make some cobbled streets using a thick rubber mat and using a silicon acrylic that you squeeze out onto the mat, and then I used a roller that I got to make the impression of cobbled streets. That was the plan. Didn't quite work out like that, at least the first time. It has improved with practice, but rather foolishly when I started it, I thought I'll just cut out a thwacking great length of road and everything will go fine and I'll use that. Well, that didn't quite work out, so I'm left with a 2 foot length of thick rubber mat with, well, this is the surface I was left with. I actually thought, I can repurpose this into rivers, particularly for my 10 mil Bane Wars campaign. We've just started part 2 of that. I'm in the process of rebuilding my undead army, and there's going to be lots of exciting battles coming up in that, hopefully. So I'm going to need some terrain. Now, I did try before, you may remember, using plastic sheet painted underneath to get a very nice river surface. That looked really good. The problem I had with that was over time, the edges curled up because it's quite thin plastic. So yeah, when I took them out of the box last time, the edges had all curled up. They're very difficult to use. I saw a clip about using rubber matting for roads, so that's what gave me the idea to use that for my cobbled streets in Innsmouth, because of course rubber is going to sit flat on the table. Now the problem I had with that, apart from my own ineptitude of course, was that the only mat I could find in B&M was really quite thick because it had like little studs on the bottom. Not ideal, but for 28 mil, it's okay. So I've got that. However, I have just sourced on Amazon a much more suitable mat. So it's got that sort of ribbed pattern on one side, if you pardon the expression, and the other side is perfectly flat. I think that's going to be much more suitable. That is on the way, and I shall continue my cobbled streets using that. So that leaves me a lot of thick rubber matting, and I thought, well, can I use this for rivers? I've got some other ideas for it as well. Let's give that a try, particularly as that first attempt on the cobbled streets came out looking much more watery than cobbly. Now, before I found that mat on Amazon, I was looking around some of the other DIY stores as well. I went into Wickes, which is literally just over the road from B&M, and they didn't have any suitable rubber matting. But what I did find was this. This is a very large plastic sheet. I think it's called protective sheet. This is a couple of mils thick, and the selling point for me was this huge size sheet was available for, it's about £3.50, I think, somewhere between £3 and £4. Well, I thought for that price, I can't go wrong. Even if it doesn't work, it's not suitable. I've only spent a few quid. So I bought a sheet of that, and then I thought, okay, 10 mil, or actually even 28 mil, let's get some roads built up as well. I do already have some roads in both scales. My 28 mil roads, I knocked up some using the vinyl floor tiles, the ones that are sticky on one side. However, I built them in quite short lengths. I think those tiles are maybe a foot square or so, and for some reason I cut the roads down into quite short lengths. With a huge plastic sheet like this, of course, well, I can build roads that are sort of 2 foot long. That means they look better on the table, there's less joins, and also I'm hoping this plastic is thick enough that it doesn't curl up. I did some 10mm roads as well on cloth, like a canvasy type cloth. That was not too bad actually. They came out pretty well. But I thought with this, well, let's give it a try, get some long straight lengths of road, quite Romanesque roads, I suppose, in a way, which sort of fits in with the lore of the Bane Wars. All right, so that's the plan. Let's see if it survives contact with the enemy. And I'm just using my usual cheap acrylic paints from the craft shop for this. A few different shades of blue. And while I was in Wix, I bought a new brush as well. So this goes on very easily, of course. And then I know rivers always seem to be really bright blue on War Games tables. So I've got that bright blue and I'm going to mix in a couple of those other colours as well. Still a bit, you know, Mediterranean, but they stand out on the table, I guess. And there we go, quick and easy job. I've got my pieces done there. So then I thought, well, what about the surface? What about a nice glossy surface? And I looked at using some clear silicone. Cheap to buy, easy to apply. Just put it on and then I use a plastic spatula just to spread it around. Now this does have quite an odour with it, so I would advise having a door or window open while you're doing this. Probably best to wear gloves as well, just to be on the safe side. But yeah, hopefully you can see in this, it does give a nice glossy surface, and also that's going to be quite tough as well, and of course it will bend with the rivers should I need to. Then I thought for the banks, well, just apply some PVA glue to the edges and then use my usual flocking just to build up the banks. And as I said, these pieces are quite thick, so I don't really need to add any filler or anything to build up the banks, as the edges are thick already. And that is pretty much it really for the rivers. Very quick, very easy. A little bit bright, but I might tone those down with a wash before I varnish. Now for the roads, for a template, I use the plastic tub that I plan to store these in, so that will give me an idea of the length I can use. And then I thought I'm going to cut along these lengths as well, because you can probably see there's a bit of a grain on this, so it made sense to cut my main sheet out along that grain rather than going across it. Then using some 10mm figures as a template, I marked out the width for a road, which I think I use 45mm here, because with Fantastic Battles you're working on 40mm bases for your figures. So cutting out quite long road sections initially. I think I did about 6 or 7 of those out of that one sheet, and also added in a few junction pieces as well. Very easy to work with. You can use scissors or a craft knife to cut this stuff. And then of course I'm going to cover these with scatter, my usual mix of greens and browns and some little rocks there as well. That looks a bit like curry powder in the middle, doesn't it? It might even be. PVA and a teaspoon just to sprinkle that across, and yeah, I sprinkled a few different types of scatter on there just to give a bit of variation in tone and texture. And as I said, these fit in with the Bane Wars setting, where these roads are, well, they've been rather abandoned and ruined, so we certainly don't need any tarmac roads. We certainly don't need any cobbles, thank God. So this is another quick and easy job. Bit of PVA along the edges, and then apply some flocking along the edges just to give a nice border, also to cover up that black line because this stuff is black, the edges do look a bit stark. So that flock is softening those edges off as well. And that's it. They're all ready to be varnished. And there we go. I've just put together a quick layout there to give an idea of how that might look on the table. I'm pretty pleased with all of that. There's always that problem of joins with anything, but I don't know that there's much you can do about that. Perhaps you can build some sort of overlapping thing at each end, maybe. I don't know. But overall, I'm very pleased with that. I'm going to use that rubber matting to continue building some rivers and also some lakes and maybe marshy areas as well. I may also integrate that into the Innsmouth build as part of Innsmouth Beach. Yes, we're going to be making Innsmouth Beach. There's a place you don't want to visit. But overall, yeah, that's satisfactory. As I say with my wargaming stuff, I always have to remind myself, because I was a diorama builder in a past 1/35th scale. This is not a diorama, it's for tabletop. You're looking at it from 4 or 5 feet away. It has to look reasonably good, and of course it has to be practical as well. I think both the road and rivers here fit that criteria, so yes, I'm happy with those. I'll be making some more. And as always, of course, I welcome your comments and suggestions. Any little tips you've got are gratefully received. Someone mentioned The Range as a good shop as well in a comment, so I'll be investigating that as well. I think it's great. You think modelling, wargaming, yeah, there's the model shop, there's Hobbycraft, but the stuff you can find in a lot of these sort of DIY or home stores is often very useful as well. So, well worth having a scout around. I'm also pleased to say that we've hit 400 subscribers now. We've just gone over that this last week. So thanks very much to everyone who's subscribed. I really do appreciate the support. And of course, if you want to help the channel grow and you haven't already, please do click the subscribe button below. That will also keep you up to date in all our ongoing series, which includes that Bane Wars campaign and of course the dreaded Innsmouth build. Okay, that's it for now. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you soon.